Part 1, Chapter 2, Solitude. By the time the final bell rang, Joey was gone. Hollow guilt ravaged my heart as I exited the bathroom and slipped into the crowd. The bustling river of bodies was tightly packed and lively, allowing me to glide alongside my peers all the way until I reached the front doors to leave. The moment I stepped out into the open air, I abandoned that hopeless feeling and replaced it with renewed optimism. For as crappy as the day was, it could have been worse. It was a bright and warm day at the tail end of September. Personally perfect weather and air quality for my liking. The sweet taste of dry leaves and chilled air brushed across my senses and nostalgically reignited me, inducing a serene lull that I leaned into. School started nearly a month early this year, due to the abnormal amount of snow days we had last winter, which is fine by me. Hopefully that means there will be a better balance of workshop and half-days. As the sun's fractured rays soaked into my skin, I felt the sharp bitterness of a harsh wind blowing desperately through the students as they left the building. The lingering dampness in my clothes embraced the gust and transferred abruptly to my flesh. Still somewhat on the lookout, I checked my flanks every few steps as I made my way along the thin sidewalk toward the main road. I could take the bus, but Stacy and I share the same route, and sometimes her brother Brent has after-school plans and can't drive her home. The last thing I want is to be stuck in a 30-minute bus ride with her after today. So instead, a casual, chilly walk would be my trek home. I approached a bold red stop sign that transitioned from school property to the main road. Buses lined up on my left with their turn signals on, waiting to depart. One bus pulled away, and another took its place. This one was stopped for a few seconds longer, long enough for me to walk most of its length and almost reach the sign. I barely caught it amidst my roaming mind, but one of the windows scraped open. Without warning, I was struck in the side of the head. I staggered to the side and stopped walking. Slightly shocked, I looked down to see a purple plastic pencil case busted open and drooling water into the cracks of the pavement. Then I felt the dribbling chill run down the side of my head and under my shirt. My mouth hung open, disbelief all over my face. I focused up on the bus window and saw none other than Stacy leaning out the window with her arm extended, a big proud smile on her cruel face. "See you tomorrow, dog face," she mocked. A distorted voice projected through the bus speakers and ordered her to sit down. She obeyed, but never stopped glaring at me through the tinted glass. A line of traffic kept the bus locked in place even longer, giving me time to bend down and pick up the pencil case, empty it of remaining water, and clamp it shut. I held it by my side and ogled furiously back at her, mind fritzing with heinous thoughts inspired by Joey's radical suggestion. It's true. I'd like to put her on the ground and make her say sorry for once. Something else caught my eye. Apart from Stacy and the sorority squad in front and behind her, there was someone a few seats back just staring at me with a look of intrigue. It was hard to see her from this angle, but I know I didn't recognize her. I know faces, especially in a school as small as this, and I've never seen her before. My bag slipped from one shoulder and I unzipped the top to collect the pencil case. As I secured the bag and slung it back, the bus started to pull forward, and the mysterious girl gave me a final look before facing forward. Once the road was safe to cross, I got to the other side and began my 4-mile walk home. Nothing but vigor and venom coursing through the highways of nonlinear thought. Sporadic and nonsensical at times, I did my best to let casual imagery roam and keep me occupied. No use dwelling on the day now that it's over. The first mile was slow and populated. Other students passed by later than the buses in their personal vehicles, each blaring some undesired genre of music that I couldn't ignore. Others passed me on bikes, and even some adults approached from my front on a jog. The first chunk of time after school gets out is the only time this sad little town comes to life. Many homes and businesses occupied this strip of budget highway, everything from secondhand shops to rental homes to a lonely liquor store. I never understood how that establishment in particular could have been built so close to a school. I guess it didn't matter to the people in charge considering the amount of business it generated. Most out-of-towners speed along this road to get to a determined destination and only stop in for the essentials, most of which are collected at said liquor store. which I guess makes sense for them. I still find it odd and disconcerting. With the school far enough in my rear view, I thought about the few activities I could distract myself with once I got home. There wasn't much to do. Maybe read or watch TV. I could snack on something or hang out at the forest edge. That depends on if my dad's even home. I continued down the barren sidewalk that stretched along the main road, kicking bits of broken cement as I swayed. Not much scenery to speak of. Nothing new, anyway. All the same people and all the same buildings that I've come to know throughout my entire life, now just fickle, boring colors in the background. Not too long later, the world finally transitioned at the halfway point away from businesses. Now, only tall, thick trees hide a few small houses and driveways with the occasional river trench beside the road. Like everything else, I've seen it all 1,000 times. I started to zone out. Cars became less frequent on the road and people even less so. Some children played in their fenced-in yards but did so quietly. The sidewalk turned to dirt and the road thinned as I took the next turn. After about 3 miles of mindless walking, the entrance to my driveway remained invisible but presented itself to those that knew. Branching off from this barren straightaway and pushing deep into the trees, consumed by the dark, dense forest. Silence and secrecy became law once the threshold was crossed. My lower back had started to hurt, and the repetitive trudge forward turned my feet prickly. My weary footsteps dragged to a halt as I half-crooked to my left. A few hundred feet into the trees was the place I called home. Halted and breathing through my nose, I numbly gazed at the chipping bark that held a very small green sign with a name and number on it. 87, Avery. The details of my abode immersed acquaintance while I closed in. Small, run-down, and dingy, a mossy and dank screened-in porch was the first thing you saw, giving off a terrible first impression. Packed with sun-bleached old furniture and wet trash bags full of scrap metal and who knows what, anyone who approached would not have any reasonable expectations. Up the few short steps and through the screened door, which doesn't close all the way and screams like a banshee, were tools, paint cans, and an old torn-up couch. All just lying there, somehow forgotten and getting older and dirtier. I obliviously knocked on the door and waited. When there was no answer, I refocused and I noticed a small note stuck into the house with a thumbtack next to the door handle. Kim, out shopping, be back later, Dad. I read the note out loud, then scowled. I took a step back from the front door and turned to face the driveway with a sharp inhale. My mind was so full of random nonsense that I didn't even notice the car wasn't there. It only had one place to be, dead center of the driveway, and I completely missed it. Well, at least I don't have to go through his questioning until later, I spoke aloud. I took the note off the door and crumpled it, disposing of it temporarily in my back pocket. He left the door unlocked, which is surprising considering his paranoid attitude. The warm bronze knob, however, played its old and stubborn games. The broken mechanism jammed itself and forced me to be aggressive with the handle until it clicked and opened with a loud creaking noise. One of these days I'm going to snap that thing in half. Maybe then we can finally get a new one. My shoes were quickly removed and my arms stretched toward the ceiling. Finally, a relieved groan left me wobbly. The first sight you would see when you walked in is the living room on your left and the kitchen on your right with an open space separating the two. The kitchen contained a semicircle of cabinets lining the wall with a few appliances between them. The living room snugly fit a couch in the center with a couple of cheap end tables by either arm and a small worn coffee table at its front. The arrangement faced a medium-sized box TV on a bureau against the back wall, which divided this room from a staircase. Between the kitchen and living room straight ahead of the door was a horizontal support beam that acted as a transition to the living quarters. A door to my dad's room was in the center, and on the right around the corner was the master bathroom. To the left of that archway, and down a very short narrow hall, was the ascending staircase that climbed up over his doorway. Above his door was a rib-high railing that overlooked the entrance and living room. Just past the rails upstairs are 2 more doors. My bedroom's in the middle, and a tiny bathroom down another short hall was to the left. Outside of the crusty visuals, one specific feature of this space stood out no matter what day or time: the smell. A mixture of rotten wood and stale everything. Musky, sour ick. The stench was an accumulation of an overflowing garbage bin, dirty dishes, food left out, and a mass amount of half-drunk beer cans and bottles strewn about the living room and kitchen counter. Not to mention, there was always a crude stench of something mossy and wet somewhere undetermined. Bleach didn't have a competitive chance here. Though today, the sink was somehow much worse. The natural layer of putrid trash could almost be felt on my skin, but underneath that was some denser blob of decay. My nose crinkled and my eyes burned as this rotten smell slithered around my ankles. Oh, what the hell? I pinched my nose. I sauntered over to the kitchen and pried open the junk drawer in the corner by the overhang. I dug through a lot of miscellaneous items until I found a little orange lighter. Then I moved to the coffee table and uncapped the lone candle surrounded by newspapers and a couple of screwdrivers. The papers were set in the end table and the tools were neatly lined up in front of the TV. The black wick was lined up with the mouth of the lighter, and after a few sad sparks, it produced a fickle flame. I set the lighter down beside the candle and watched the thin smoke rise. All right, now the house can smell like death and vanilla, I joked, before turning in a half circle and looking around. It was so quiet. I double-checked the front door to make sure it was shut and locked how he'd want it, before adjusting my bag strap and moving toward the hall. I ascended the staircase with only a minor ache in my ankles, and once I reached the top, I pushed my bedroom door open and threw my bag onto the floor for the moment. I then took a reverse step back out and rounded the short corner to squeeze down the tight passageway which led to my bathroom. The door barely scraped by the edge of the sink as it opened inward, and required me to brace my legs against the toilet to close it behind me. I positioned myself in front of the mirror and reaffirmed my appearance. Idle dissociation struck with my reflection glaring back at me, the edges of my form shimmering, unfocused. The waves in my hair were less than their usual selves, so I took a brush from the countertop and gave it new life. With a mighty shake of my head, the mid-tone brown fluffed out and bounced. I patted it down with my hands and fixed my bangs. The red t-shirt I wore had almost dried. That is, until she threw that pencil case and re-wet it. I sensed the grief swirling in my belly. Looking at myself, the burden of today and every other day before just started to pile on. I pinched my eyes shut and shook the bad thoughts away, instead choosing to smile at myself to force positivity. The blue of my eyes was brighter than before, and that smudge of tired purple beneath had lessened. I debated on taking a shower, but I knew the hot water heater still wouldn't be ready since our 2 showers this morning, even by now. So instead, I gave my face a tired rub and exited the bathroom. I felt an electric tickle soothe my skin as I entered my room, taking in the little details of this humble domain, recollecting its state this morning compared to now. I determined everything was in order. The full-size mattress had its cheap headboard crudely pressed up against the left wall, with the feet pushing into the center and aligning nicely with the standing dresser on the opposite wall. To the right of the dresser was a tiny closet that only served the purpose of housing a few small boxes and some warmer clothes for the winter. Its best feature was the standing mirror my dad attached to the outside of the door. Lastly, my one small window was dead ahead as you're walking into the room. I flopped onto my bed, suffering a strange chill between my ribs. Palpable buzzing all around me, crickets singing outside, and the soft clunk of old piping under the foundation coated me in hollow reality. The more I relaxed, the more I soaked in the rumbling buzz. I sat up on my bed and just felt the idle nature of a lonely house in the woods. Breathing shallowly, my mind swelled with many conflicting thoughts and ideas. I closed my eyes. Numb, pressurized, a speck. I could almost feel my spirit and body as separate tangible things. My own breathing echoed in my head as the world grew that much more distant. I couldn't help but reach back into the day and all the days leading up. The crap I endured and how much it truly upset and confused me. I could almost see the color of anger in my chest, little explosive waves contained in a glass box. It spiked again, and I was forced to open my eyes. I didn't realize I was clutching the comforter, jaw shaking with grit teeth and a pit in my stomach. I shook my head. It's not worth it. I ushered myself. I looked at the clock on my nightstand. It was almost 4. I hopped off the bed and retrieved my backpack. All the textbooks and notebooks were removed and spread across my mattress. Then I turned on the nightstand lamp and opened the drawer. A pang of sadness struck when I held the CD player in my hands. The old knotted headphones barely worked, and the pop-up disc tray was held shut with tape. Still, I couldn't hide my smile. I turned it on and jammed one earbud in. The first track on the burned disc labeled as Daily Mix started playing, and I was taken back years in the past. My head bobbed with the beat I grew to love because it came from him. A gift from the only person in the world who made me smile in the toughest of times. A precious, irreplaceable friend. His Daily Mix CD had become my personal homework background track for the day. And for the next hour and a half, I breezed through geography, math, and English homework. Every scribble and notch in the papers was punctuated by a steady beat and hum-along, creating a tranquil bubble of just me and the music. Peace. For the first time all day, I was able to just sit and focus on the task at hand. No distractions, no pestering, no mental degradation. All the worries and woes were locked out by these earbuds, and I simply worked. The disc quickly reached the end of the set list and restarted multiple times. I powered it off and cracked both my knuckles and my neck, ogling at the small stack of completed worksheets. I looked at the clock again. 5:45. I nodded. Not bad. Sat on the bed and surrounded by school stuff. I crossed my legs and stiffened my back as I stretched, releasing a strained yawn. In the middle of my stretch, a sudden loud thump came from downstairs. I rolled off my bed and ripped my door open. 2 steps into the hall, and I could easily see the front door wide open through the guard railing. Ah, shit. A slow, raspy voice slithered through the silent house. Taking the remaining steps up to the rail, I leaned my arm against it and watched the door handle bounce off the wall again as he kicked it out of frustration. With little to no emotion, I called out to him, "Hey, Dad." "Hello, Kimberly," he said with a groan. "This fucking doorknob is gonna bust a hole in the wall one of these days." I smirked a little. "I know. The handle gave me some problems when I got home. I think we need a new one." "No, we don't need a new doorknob. My dad used to always tell me, if it's old, it's good. Therefore, we keep it." I rolled my eyes. He set his keys on the nearest counter and started unpacking the 3 bags he was carrying. Milk, bread, chips, cereal, yogurt, and of course, some kind of beer. "How was school?" he asked with an obligatory tone while putting things where they belong. "Fine," I replied dryly. "I just finished my homework." He didn't reply right away, just mindlessly set stuff aside and crumpled the bags, tossing them onto the counter without care. When he did respond, it came in a dry huff. "Anything new with you?" I licked my lips, mentally back in the bathroom, alone. "No, not really." "You sound mad or something. Did anything happen?" I shrugged. "Just the same old crap. A little harassment to round off the day." I tried to chuckle, but the bitter texture of my voice gave me away. He peeked at me from the corner of his eye. "That girl again? What's her name?" "Stacy Kingston," I answered. He stopped for a second and faced me completely. Broad shoulders, toned arms, and an uncomplimentary beer gut were his prominent features. The skinny nature of his face gave him a tired and older look, and the messy, ear-tip-length hair made him look the part of a hard-ass even more. His patchy dark stubble and stained 80s hair metal shirt gave me the indication that he had gotten up early for work, probably filling potholes or something along those lines. "Right." His left eye squinted somewhat, like he was thinking. "Are you doing anything about it?" "Besides avoiding her as much as I can? No. Why? Do you want me to stand up to her like you did with all your bullies?" I chuckled lightly. "I didn't have bullies. I had enemies. No, we don't need you getting into a fight," he addressed before taking a moment to lean into the fridge. I sighed loudly. Honestly, I've spoken with teachers, but they can't do anything about it. Discomfort rolled across my skin. He put the last of the groceries away and went through his daily motions. Open beer, grab the remote, turn on the TV, sit on the couch, and do absolutely nothing. I've never seen anybody get so comfy so fast. "Well, the less you react, the more likely she is to stop," he said, now utterly disinterested. The way he just sat down and started watching TV filled me with potent dejection. "I guess," I muttered, tapping my pointed foot on the floor and leaning against the railing. The murmur of whatever garbage on the TV that held his attention completely latched onto his brain. And now, despite the fact that he was home for the night, I was alone again. That didn't last long, I thought to myself. I didn't depart. Not quite yet. I waited up there, looking down on him with saddened eyes and a longing magnetism. Just waiting, hoping for him to re-engage. A weekly fantasy I played out started fresh. He would see me and smile, turn off the TV with renewed energy and say something like, "Hey kiddo, let's watch a movie. Maybe tomorrow I can pick you up from school and we can get ice cream, or how about we go for a drive and stop at the local baseball park and play catch?" But no. He was, as of this moment, switched off. Might as well be dead to the world. I gave it 5 minutes too long and finally pushed myself off the railing and turned toward my room. The door eased shut behind me and I sat on my bed again, surrounded by schoolwork and empty hours before bedtime. I started to pick up the papers and meticulously sort them back into my bag. When that was done, I set it by the door and pondered my night. The room had a soft yellow glow from my nearby lamp, emitting an ominous vibe that filled my brain with thoughts of coming autumn. My head pivoted as I observed all the dark corners, eventually resting on a spiderweb that stuck in the corner of the slanted ceiling. Bored, I flicked the lamp on and off. Dark, light, dark, light, dark. Surrounded by the void, I listened closely. The laughter from the TV, the creaking of an old house, the wind pushing through the trees. So many small details, mostly gone unnoticed, were picked apart and amplified to me. I always had a keen sense of awareness, one I didn't control necessarily. It occurred to me that he didn't question the lit candle, but what's even more unsettling is that the rotten smell that struck me when I got home was even worse upstairs. When it comes to cleanliness, I like to think I rank on the upper echelon, maybe a 7 out of 10 on the scale. After all, you can only polish a turd so much, but polish it I will. This house was so old and dirty in a way that never made any logical sense. Sure, he leaves small messes all over the place, but he's not a filthy person. There's no reason for the carpet to be so much darker in some spots than in others. There's no reason for the ceiling directly above my bed to look as if every night when I sleep, my body bursts into flames and all my evaporating juices collect in the paint above. And there is absolutely no reason why the stench of death lurks just under the threshold of blatant observation. It just does. I got up again and sauntered toward my window against the back wall directly across from my door and pried it open. The double-pane glass rumbled and whined as it was forcibly raised, allowing a cool new breeze to slither past my skin and steal the thick air. I relit the bulb and moved over to the dresser to get changed for the night. I didn't feel like doing much of anything anymore. The idea to read one of the 3 books I own seemed more uninteresting than ever. So, I plopped back onto my bed and crossed one foot over the other. Flat on my back, my hands interlocked behind my head, and I stared up at the discolored ceiling. I always hated the paint drip style, the way it casts weird shadows and collects pockets of dust. I thought back to one time when my mom ran a daycare here, when this neighbor girl was jumping up and down on my bed and somehow propelled herself high enough to dig a pointy paint blob into the soft spot of her head. She cried for almost an hour, and that was the last time any of the kids were allowed upstairs. The pointed shadows had one positive. I had a friend up there. A little shadow formed when only the lamp was on and there was no daylight leaking in from the window. The drips cast the shape of a little man with spiky hair, and what my younger self determined to be a bird's beak of all things. Glancing up from time to time, I silently greeted him, making sure he knew I hadn't forgotten. I thought back again to when I first discovered him. The time frame is foggy, but I've been told he replaced my other imaginary friends on occasion, whatever that means. I don't remember having imaginary friends, or any friends at all until the daycare took off, and even that was turbulent. I smiled timidly. It's so vivid, even today. The first time I saw Joey and the way I hit him on the head with a toy because he was bigger than me and I was scared. That's how we met, and we've been friends ever since. The smile turned to a frown, and a lead weight was placed on my chest. Does he really think we aren't friends? I guess it makes sense with the way I treat him now. I hate myself for it, but it's the only way I've found that keeps me safe. That keeps me from getting hurt or hurting anyone else. A one-sided, comfortable, convenient distance where he no longer has to put up with my temperament, my mood swings and self-destructive tendencies. I know he just wants to help, to be there for me, to be an outlet and close friend like we were before. I know I'm wrong, and that's half the reason why. He deserves a better friend than me. He deserves more than someone who so harshly abandoned him.